My name is Hayley Newton. It's the 9th of June 2025 and we are in the Bendat Basketball Centre.
Okay. Hayley, can you start by a big question, but maybe the easiest one? What does basketball mean to you?
Well, basketball to me is more than just a sport. It's something that has been a constant in my life for pretty much as long as I can remember. And it not only gave me an avenue for, exercise and participation in that sort of route, but it gave me friends and companions that have been with me since the beginning. And now I know that I have lifelong friends. So it gives you this community that is really special, and you get bonded by all of the activities that you do together through trainings and games, and then all the social side of things as well, catching up on the weekends outside of the sport. So it is more than just something that you do for a little bit of exercise.
So how did you start playing?
Some people might say it was forced upon me because of my parents, but it's not true. Both my parents actually met playing basketball at the stadium that I then played up my whole life. But as a child, they gave us every opportunity to try whatever we wanted to do. And then when it came time for me to pick which sport I was going to pursue for, the majority of my childhood, basketball was the one that jumped out at me. And yeah, just happened to be a coincidence that both my parents played, and also the two sisters, all three of us grew up playing together.
So what did you like about the actual playing basketball?
Well, technically it's a non-contact sport, but you can get away with a few hip and shoulders here and there. So it's a good chance to be aggressive without being, angry or coming across as this, aggro person. But it's a really awesome opportunity to, let loose a little bit and, be more than just a quiet little girl that some people think you might be off the court. And then similar to what I kind of just touched on was that, you get to meet different people and create these friendships and play a team sport. There's nothing like shared victory. It's really fun. I think that is a great aspect of team sports, is just the camaraderie that you get when you're playing.
And do you think basketball offers something for girls in particular?
Yeah, for sure. I actually really appreciate that basketball is one of the, it's a sport that there's not many differences between the women's league and the men's league. We play with a smaller ball, but ultimately we have the same rules. Same 3-point line, same keyway, same time length of games. So the skills that we have are really valuable, and I think it's unfair if you just think, oh, the boys' league is better, when it's just not the case.
How was your basketball career developed? Like, what level were you playing before you injured yourself, and how did you get there?
So I started at just the junior level. So I think the first grade I would have been under 8, so a 6 or a 7-year-old playing in that league. I did all of my junior sport at Wilson Basketball Association, so I played all the way from there until I then reached the SBL level, so the state league level. So that is, about 10, 12 years of my life at Willerton. Once I then finished school, I actually pursued going to university in America and playing college basketball, which at the time I was not really fully aware of what I was getting myself into. It wasn't super common. Prior to myself and a few others the same age as me going, I didn't really know anybody that had went, especially not females. So I was a little apprehensive of that, but I ended up going, really enjoyed it. It's a great opportunity. Came back to Perth and then rejoined Willerton for the SBL. And then in 2021, they changed to now what's known as the NBL1, so the National Basketball League. I also did development player for the Perth Lynx for a couple of seasons. Tried that out, and ultimately there was some struggles between balancing that, an unpaid gig, with university study, trying to work and move out of home, and ended up, just doing the 2 years, and then decided to pursue with studies after that.
So can you that last bit, can you just take me through that a bit? Also, what, in practical terms, what did it mean when you were a development player with the Lynx and trying to balance?
Yeah. So being a development player, you're essentially assumed and required to do everything that a contracted player would. So that involved training every day of the week, Monday to Friday, on the court for 2-3 hours, and then also included gym sessions, which I think from memory were 2 or 3 times a week as well. And then once you're in season, that's games once or twice a week. But yeah, ultimately the trainings were at less than ideal times. They were maybe between 9 and 1, which doesn't mean you can work beforehand, and then it's quite hard to work afterwards unless you're working late into the evenings. So then it did become hard to juggle. I ended up, I think, deferring my university here for 6 months so that I could just focus on basketball and work rather than trying to study at the same time. Because as a development player, you were not paid. And so I also was living out of home at the time, so I needed to work to pay rent. So that was something I couldn't sacrifice. I did have to work. So it was hard to manage people's expectations, like the coaching staff and things. They might want you to do certain things and be reaching certain levels, but we didn't have the same flexibility to do that as compared to the contracted players. Although, that is improving now. I'm aware that development players are starting to get paid, which is great. And then also contracted players are getting paid more than what they were previously. So conditions for women in that league are improving, which is awesome.
And how's that compared to a male in the development squad?
Yeah, totally different. So they are getting paid, and they're getting paid. They've been getting paid for quite some time. I'm not sure the exact dates on that or how much they're getting paid, but ultimately I'm aware that they can fully focus on their basketball. It's expected of them to be there, and they're getting supported in that way, which is great. But unfortunately, women were not granted the same opportunity at the time.
When you made that decision, it couldn't have been easy. How did it feel?
Yeah, no, it was really disappointing, I guess. It's hard to then, have to weigh up what's more important to you, be sport or, education in your future career. Because realistically, unfortunately, people have to make the decision that sport is not forever. It's actually such a small part of your life. And while it would have been awesome to try and stay in that league and pursue it for longer, particularly as a woman, we have additional challenges such as having families that shorten your careers. A decision did have to be made then, whether I'm going to value my career as outside of basketball compared to basketball. So, it was tough, and I did deliberate it on at the time. And obviously other factors came into play about whether, if I did stick around, would I actually get contracted? Team dynamics, that sort of thing. Would I be willing to play overseas or play interstate? And then obviously I personally had already been away, had been to America for a few years. So at the time I wasn't willing to go traveling again because I'd already just spent 3 years away from home. It wasn't easy, but I guess a way I used to, justify it in a sense was that it was always going to be just a portion of my life, and I really enjoyed that time of it when I was in it. But I knew that it was never going to be forever for me. So ultimately I was content with my decision to not pursue it further after that.
Okay. So what would you see as the highlight of your playing career so far?
My university team, we won a conference championship, which was really cool. And then the first season, when SBL changed to NBL 1, Willetton, we won the championship, which was really awesome. So that was a really great achievement for us, and it was great for the West Australian League because that was a really great year. Everything was really hype. Basketball was on the big screen, everything was getting live streamed. So there was a lot of support around basketball. And then I've had, some personal highlights throughout the years. Playing state growing up, we had a couple of bronze medals at national championships and a couple of MVPs for my teams and things. But I think the biggest one was probably seeing the league change from SBL to NBL 1 and then our club personally was quite strong, and we had 3 years where we went to the championship. Unfortunately, only won one of those years. But yeah, we had a really good run of being a strong team.
So you might need to explain to a non-basketball audience, like me. So when you say you went to the championship with NBL 1, are you talking about playing the other clubs within WA, or are you talking about going interstate?
Yeah, correct. So I'm talking about the ones that are in WA. So when we did transfer to the NBL 1 organisation framework, that does entail we play all the teams in Western Australia, and then the winners of each conference then play this national tournament where we do play teams from other states of Australia. Unfortunately, the year we won, 2021, the East Coast was still dealing with the effects of COVID, so there was no international travel. So we were planning to then have an international, like a national tournament where we go play over East, but unfortunately it didn't go ahead that year. So subsequently the next year, we make the grand final again, we lose. We didn't get that opportunity. However, the Western Australian team, both the men and women's team, they went over and they won. And so that was really awesome for NBL 1 West, because there was this preconception that, you know, Western Australia is not one of the strongest states to be in for basketball. And that just proved them wrong right off the bat, that Western Australia is a great destination for basketball. We've got really strong teams and players. So that was really great to see.
And so in terms of the NBL 1, how does that equate to other sports that people might be more familiar with, like football? What sort of level is it?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because I'm probably not super familiar with other sports because I spent my whole life just playing basketball. But it's probably equivalent, like if you take Australian rules footy, it would be similar to the Waffle League in, you know, it's technically semi-professional because some players get paid, but not everybody. But as far as I'm aware, I think the requirement is probably quite low compared to some of those other semi-professional leagues. Most teams only train twice a week, maybe a third time during pre-season. And then the season is only about 6 months out of the year.
Okay. Turning to your personal experience, I believe it was in 2022 you injured your knee, is that right?
Yeah.
So can you talk me through what physically happened?
Yeah. Well, I was playing a game and ultimately I just jumped up for a rebound, and when I landed there was a bit of a pop I felt a pressure. Some people describe ACL injuries as a pop, but I don't remember feeling this pop. It was more of a pressure, and I had kind of thought somebody had hit me. But it wasn't until looking back at the film and I realized I was just like pretty much by myself, and I just had a little twist of the knee. Yeah, and I just, you know, passed it off to my teammate and then hobbled off the court because I realized that I'd hurt myself. So yeah, it's a little bit weird to think that it was actually, you know, nothing big, significant. I didn't get hit. I didn't even fall over. I don't think, you know, just a little twist of the knee in the wrong direction. Yeah, then that was ultimately the end of that season, and the subsequent 2023 season I didn't get to play either.
So what happens after you've hurt yourself, cobble off the court? Do you have physios on the side? Do you have doctors?
Yeah.
Come with any of that sort of support? Yeah,
so our club did, and a lot of clubs do as well, they're called a sports trainer is the title. So she, the one that helped me on the night, is not a physio, but she does massage and things like that. So she gave me a little assessment. She couldn't confirm or deny at that point what I had done. Ultimately, just kind of strapped me up a little bit and said to see how I feel. So I tried to, you know, jog up and down a little bit, but I was feeling very unstable in the knee. So I didn't continue that game. And then I did get assessed by a physio that night at the game, actually. Another one was there. And they had thought that it wasn't my ACL, and then referred me back to their clinic. So I went to their clinic and saw another employee who also said, oh, it's probably not your ACL, but we'll get a scan just to check. And then, granted, this is also in the semi-final of the season. So I was really looking forward to trying to play because we won that game and then we were going to the championship. which was to be played here. So I had the scan, and then, unfortunately a week before the grand final, I was told that I had done my ACL, which was obviously very upsetting because I was quite lucky that my whole career up to that point, I'd pretty much had no major injuries for sure, like a little rolled ankle here and there. So it was, quite, I'm getting emotional now.
Tell us about your rehabilitation. So what happens once you've been told I presume they schedule an operation? In football you hear normally that someone does it and within days they seem to be in the hospital. Did you have to wait a while because you're not a paid professional sport?
Yeah.
What's the process?
Yeah, so we I handled that all myself. So I ended up going to see a surgeon, going to a GP, getting a referral to a surgeon, going to the surgeon. I had private health insurance, so I was able to go see a doctor and get it done privately. So I think I had my surgery within a month, which is pretty speedy for a not professional athlete. Some people aren't so lucky. If you're not privately insured and you have to go through the public system, you do have to wait a little while longer. Then I did that. Basketball Australia does have a insurance policy that covers all athletes, whether it be SBL or the NBL 1 level, and even just to your social leagues. You just have to go through the process of applying for it yourself, and they'll reimburse you for your costs for, I want to say, up to $3,000 from memory, which is also challenging to navigate because then you've got to get a bunch of reports and things, get all the required documents and send all that off. And then after the surgery, we are kind of left to our own devices. So I'm not sure, every club would handle it differently, but given that it was essentially the end of the season, I had my surgery after the grand final, which we'd lost. And then I had to do those first 4 or 5 months of rehab by myself. So I was, seeing the doctor when I was supposed to. I then saw a physio a few times, but, money is finite. And I was, still I think I was still working casually at that point. And the stadium doesn't cover those sorts of things. So I was, having to make a decision whether how much I invest into my recovery. So ultimately I just decided that I would take whatever advice I could from the surgeon and the physios, and then, create a bit of a plan and do rehab by myself at the gym. And then I just kept working on myself until the following season rolled around for basketball, and came and did what I can on the sidelines while my team was training, because it was going to be, the recovery for an athlete with an ACL injury, particularly one that's not supported by a high, development program such as, the AFL, is at a minimum, 10 months to a year. It can be more depending on how well you go with your rehab. So I knew I was going to be out for that next season. So I just took my time and did all the recovery and stuff myself on the sideline.
And what did you have to do for recovery?
It's a lot of strengthening exercises, single leg stuff. A lot of it's single leg because you'd be surprised how much you lose in strength so it was basically a month of me not having an ACL, but it's incredible of how much you lose. And then in those first few weeks after surgery where you're not really walking on it, I couldn't tell you the stats now, but I think it was like 2 or 3 centimeters of muscle mass around my quadricep that I lost in that first couple of weeks because you stop using it. And then you've just got to try and get it back. So lots of single leg exercises, lots of hopping, and then eventually you work back up to change of direction, which is what the ACL is most important for. And then you can start thinking about doing contact activities. Yeah.
How important was it for you to get back to basketball?
Yeah, it was pretty important. I was only, do the math. Was I 2022? 23 years old at the time. So I still felt like I was, that is the prime basketball years for a lot of people. And yeah, I was actually pretty gutted about it because not only had we missed some basketball because of COVID, that I did my knee. And then again with the realization of, being a woman and things, that my career is only X amount of years. And it was pretty upsetting to know that, part of those years, which should have been my best basketball years, were missed, unfortunately.
And did you know other women who'd injured themselves in a similar way?
At the time, not personally. I've definitely heard of people that had done it and played against people who had those injuries. But there almost was like a little bit of a spree, which I guess it happens at that time, where after me, it felt like everybody was doing their ACLs. So it was definitely what felt like it's probably one of those things where, because it happened to me, I became more aware of that it had happened to other people as well. But I think, even within my club, somebody else had done it a little bit after me. Yeah.
So knee injuries seem to be quite common for women across all sports.
Yeah.
Was that before you did your own knee? Were you conscious of that? And was there any training geared towards avoiding the knee injury?
I don't think I was overtly aware of it. There was some understanding in my mind that injuries were common, particularly knees for women, but it wasn't something that was on my mind, and it definitely wasn't something that I was physically preparing for. Even at the time when I was training with the Lynx and things like that, and at university where, basketball is your whole life at that point, injury prevention is talked about in the terms of, being strong and maintaining your strength and doing stuff outside of just your traditional court training session. But definitely nothing was specifically spoken to me that I can recall about, doing X, Y, Z to prevent knee injuries. Yeah.
And gym sessions weren't a normal part of training?
When I went in America, they were. And here for the Lynx at the high level, yes. But at the NBL 1 level and prior to that, the SBL, it wasn't included. It's becoming more common now, I believe, between talking to other friends that play at other clubs and my club as well. It is becoming more common to do that and to have programs, whether it be just for preseason or carried through into the season. But again, I'm not sure. It would vary from club to club and person to person how tailored they are for either strength, conditioning, muscle growth, rather than perhaps injury prevention. Yeah.
What about strength and conditioning when you're in juniors? Was that ever a part of the...
No, definitely not spoken about at all, particularly that I am aware of. What I remember as a kid is you go to training and it's like 45 minutes or whatever, one night a week, and then you rock up to your games and you warm up and you play straight away. And there's a little bit of chatter about, make sure you do your stretching afterwards, but it's certainly injury prevention wasn't really talked about that I can recall. Yeah.
Do you feel like you're more knowledgeable now? I mean, are you involved in coaching at all?
Yeah.
Something that you'd be aware of?
I would assume, just based on the pure fact that of the technology increases, that people have access to so much more information now, that even your local social coach who's just, a dad with their kids or whatever it may be, they would be more aware of injuries and things like that. But I'm not a coach right now and I can't speak for the systems that may be in place. I would hope that there would be some discussion about that and coaches would be aware of what, may lead to injuries in a way that they can help prevent it. But that's not currently something that I'm a part of. Yeah.
So did you get back onto the court?
I did. Yep. In the following season, the 2024 season is when I played. Yep.
And what did that feel like when you played your first game?
Yeah, it was really great. It was really great to be back. I didn't get quite to the degree, like I never felt like the same player again. I didn't quite get my fitness back to the level for a multitude of reasons. Not just because of my injury. There was other things in my life, just work and things like that were contributing to me not, getting back to that sort of elite level, which I was before. So yeah, while it was great to be out there, there was also a little part of me that was like, oh, it's not quite the same. Yeah.
Did your knee feel the same?
No, it didn't feel the same, but it doesn't feel necessarily like unstable or bad. There's a couple of days where I'm like, oh, it hurts a little bit, or there's a little twinge here and there. But I could certainly play a game of basketball. Yeah.
Was there any nervousness when you started?
Yeah, there was a little bit. But that was something I worked on. I knew that, apprehension can be a cause of injury. And I didn't want to be if you think about something that, oh, am I going to do it again? Because there are people that do ACL injuries multiple times to themselves despite, doing all the rehab and things. But I do think that, the mental strength plays a big part in your recovery and how you come back. So that was something that I worked on. I was more nervous, not necessarily because I was going to injure myself again or thought I might injure myself again. I was just nervous about, am I going to be the same player that I was? Like, am I going to be able to perform and help my team in the same way that I previously could help my team? It was that side of things, but it was definitely really great to be out there. It was a long time coming, ended up being, close to almost 2 years not playing basketball because of the timing of my injury and the length of recovery. Yeah.
And just taking one step back, so you were unlucky enough to hurt your knee in the semi-finals and your team made the final.
Mm-hmm.
Sitting on the sideline, that must have been pretty tough.
Yeah, it was probably, one of the hardest things, especially when, things start going downhill and it doesn't look like they're going to win. But again, being a team sport is that you have the benefit of everybody to pick you up and support you. Yeah.
Okay. In terms of your knee injury, is there anything, do you think, that was different for your rehab compared to if you've been one of the men in the men's team at your same club?
No, I don't think there would have been any difference. I think the club did the best they could with the knowledge and the power that they had at the time. We didn't have a system in place to support injured athletes, particularly outside of the season, because again, I did my injury right at the end of the season. And so ultimately, once the season was over, we all dispersed and we do our own things for the off season, and we don't meet up again until pre-season. And I think that would have been the same way for the men's team. At the time, we had done the strength conditioning during pre-season, and we had that connection with the gym that we were using. And so it was offered to me or recommended to me to use that gym for recovery. However, it was all going to be out of my own pocket. And I assume that would have been the same situation for if a male had done the same injury. Perhaps they may have been in a better position to take them up on that offer because the men's team's budget is bigger than ours, and perhaps they would have been getting paid more than what I was at the time. But in terms of support from the club and the way it was handled, I think it would have been handled the same way. Yeah.
Okay. Have you noticed any other changes in how basketball approaches knee injuries? I mean, for women, it's only 3 years. I don't expect major changes, but has your club changed anything?
No, I don't think anything has really changed, thus far. They still have the same procedures in place and the same agreement with the gym. So we only do stuff with that side of things pre-season and during the season, and then when it's off season, it's up to the individual. I suppose maybe leading into the future, there would be some sort of situation where people are supported all year round if that's what they wanted and that's what they wanted to do. But at this stage, no, I think, not a lot has changed. But like you said, it's only been a few years. Yeah.
Okay. So turning to a different thing, we've been asking everybody to describe for us a typical training session.
Mm-hmm.
So for you in the NBL 1, what would be involved in a typical training session?
Yeah. Those sessions are always held in the evening on a weeknight. Generally, we were always 6 to 8. So I would just finish work, come to the stadium. We'd generally get there 15, 20 minutes early, put your shoes on, do some personal stretches or anything like that you needed to prepare to train. And then it was 2 hours on the court. So it would just be basketball specific drills for those 2 hours. And then, you do your own cool down. Well, as a team, we would cool down, do some stretches and have a chat on the sideline. And that would be the end of it. And then you'd just come back a couple of days later and do the same thing.
What sort of drills?
Lots of, obviously there's 2 components to basketball, offense and defense. So there'd be defensive drills where you're practicing your, positioning and communication with your teammates and how you want to defend certain offensive structures and things like that. And then conversely, we would do our practice our own sets, how we're going to run offense. And then skill building, dribbling, warm up was often, working on your ball handling skills. It's a good way to get the heart racing and blood pumping at the beginning, bunch of dribbling. And then, often we would end with shooting, especially once you're tired. That's a good skill to have, just to be able to shoot, at the end of the game when it matters. So finishing off with a bunch of shooting drills. Yeah.
Okay. Another thing we've been looking at is uniforms. What sort of uniform are you wearing in basketball at the moment? I mean, I don't know if you're aware, but there's been a lot of changes.
Yeah.
20 years in basketball.
Yeah.
Uniform.
Yeah, luckily I didn't have to wear the spandex things. Tanya probably did. My mum did. I've seen some photos. No, I have always worn just shorts, basketball shorts and a basketball jersey. And over the years, initially when I was starting, they were unisex or they were men's. Whereas the last few years, we have definitely had women's cuts.
And do you buy those uniforms yourselves or are they owned by the...
At the NBL 1 level, they are provided for you. And generally they do, at least for our club, my experience was they would purchase new uniforms at a minimum every 2 years, sometimes every year, depending on what your team makeup was. If they needed new jerseys, they would get new ones, or if there was sponsorship changes, things like that. At the social level, most of the time it's you purchase your shorts and the team's tops are loaned to you, and then you give them back at the end of each session or at the end of each game.
Okay. And from the perspective of a player, what do you think, what is the public's perception of women's basketball at the moment? Or when you were playing?
Yeah. No, I think it's good. I think people are interested. It's hard to see it from an outsider's perspective because I'm not an outsider. So if you ask somebody else what their opinion of it is, I wouldn't be able to answer that. But because everybody that I mostly speak to are people that are interested in basketball, so they're keen, they're happy to watch. Also, I'm probably a little bit biased in the sense that I come from a really strong club, so we've always had really good support. There's not many games where we would play where we didn't have at least 100 people in the crowd. We always had family and friend support and general community support, which, I do notice, or you did notice when I was playing, when you played other clubs that didn't have that support, there'd be almost nobody in the crowd. So that could be quite disappointing, I would imagine, being playing a lot of your home games and not having much support. But also, I guess the situation that I was in with our stadium and where it's located, it's across the road from a shopping centre, it's across the road from a school, a football club is right there. There's a really big community of sports lovers that would go to those games. And so even the locals that just go to the shops, they would be hearing about all the sports going on. And I think, while yes, the men's team consistently and still do get bigger crowds than the women's team, there is still a lot of support for the women's club and they will come and watch us. And I just think it's getting bigger and better as we go on. Yeah, every year there seems to be more people and having record crowds and memberships and things like that. So it's definitely on the up. And even just the last few years, my parents are big coaches, so I hear about everything from them. But, when I was growing up, the league was one team in under 12s for women, one team in under 12s, one team in under 14s, one under 16s, one under 18s. Whereas now you've got almost 3 or 4 teams again, this is for Willetton, who's a big club. We might have three girls teams in each age group because there's so many girls that are wanting to play. That lower junior level has just blown up in the last few years. Like basketball is off the charts. Like there's wait lists for clubs because people want to play. So the support and the interest in basketball, particularly from both girls and boys, is really increasing.
Do you have any views on like the purse links and the support they might have, and whether, I suppose some people have said to me that that women's basketball at that level is not financially viable, and they certainly couldn't fill the arena in the city.
Yeah,
so they could probably fill here.
Yeah.
So, what do you think needs to change at that level, or do you think it matters?
I don't think it matters in the sense that I personally don't think, women's basketball has to be as big as the men's. I don't think that's the benchmark of a great league. We can still have a really successful and strong women's professional league without trying to be exactly what the men's league is like. If this stadium is what we can fill, something that's 1/8 of the size of the men's stadium, that doesn't mean it's less important or less good than the men's league. So yeah, I think it's really hard to compare the two leagues just on those sorts of things. I think one of the harder things for women's basketball is keeping people in the sport, because you lose them to things such as what I had to do, where I had to pick whether I wanted to stay and keep trying to play professional basketball or continue on with a career that's probably in a direction that I'm going to spend the rest of my life. Because for most people, again, playing sport is not something you can do forever. Some people might hang around and be coaches or staff in another capacity, but the vast majority of people will play until their bodies let them and then they will stop. So I think there's definitely room for improvement, obviously, in the women's basketball. A big part would probably be, particularly for the Lynx, is keeping locals and trying to get local support by having players that people know and people see going up through the ranks and doing all those things. But I don't think you can directly compare a lot of those things that people like to compare between the two leagues, between men and women, because we are different people and we're different. Yeah. So it's.
Yeah, I can see. So there's differences. But going by what you're saying, better pay might help people like you make a decision to stay in.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Increasing the financial viability of it actually being a job. For a lot of people, even now with the increased pays, people are still working outside of the basketball, even in season. They might be working. I had a teammate who was playing for the Lynx, and she's an accountant, and she was doing accounting outside of basketball because the income from playing for the Lynx was not enough to sustain, her lifestyle at that time. So yeah, for sure, increasing money would allow people to fully commit to basketball and perhaps have a better product than what currently is now. But I don't think that the women's league is necessarily a struggling league or a low skill level league. There's definitely great players. And yeah, definitely having more money would help people stay in it for longer, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, last question then. What would you like to see in basketball in the future? If there's something you could change, what would it be?
I guess probably just simply more. That's already increasing, but we've only got 8 teams in the WNBL, so having more teams, more players, more sport. You've got gather round for footy where everybody is playing all in Adelaide or whatever it was. And they actually did do a similar thing where they had the NBL Blitz here in Perth. And so having something like that every year where you've got the opportunity to see basketball all the time, every day of the week, for both, for all leagues and all levels would be really great. You can't have too much sport.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there anything that you would like to talk about? Is there anything when you were preparing for this interview that you thought, this is what I'd really like to say?
No, not really.
Nothing else about the knee injury or your rehab or your recovery? Or what you love about it? Or
I guess if we're talking about the injury, what was kind of mentioned when the interview was brought up to me was that perhaps something was going to be discussed about menstrual cycles and how that relates to injuries, because there has been some preliminary research that suggests that different parts of your cycle or different timing leads to perhaps more injuries and things like that. So kind of going back, I guess, to what you said about, did I know about injuries or things like that? Obviously you're aware to a degree that you could be injured, but there is still so much research that's not been done, particularly on women's injuries, about how they may occur or when they occur, and then how to recover from them. So yeah, I guess in terms of sports and injuries, I do think that is something that is lacking and that could be improved upon is, more women detailed studies to actually get more accurate data on those sorts of things. Yeah.
That's an important point. Talking about menstrual cycles as well, is that something you would ever have had a conversation with your coach about?
No. I think a few people here and there would maybe be open enough to say, look, I'm not going to come to training because I'm feeling under the weather because I've got my cycle or something like that. And it's certainly something that would be less frequently talked about because a lot of basketball coaches for women are men. And so I would assume a lot of people aren't comfortable. I probably would never have said anything to my coach if it happened to be inhibiting me in that way. But there certainly seems to be more dialogue around it these days, and people are more open, and hopefully, as time goes on, it becomes more common and people are willing to discuss that if they feel like it's affecting them. Because not only physically, it can obviously affect you mentally, whether you're up to the demands of playing high-level sport at that time of the month or any stage of the month. But yeah.
Parents ever mentioned the differences of coaching women compared to men? I mean, and that's one that you've talked about these days.
Yeah.
Coaches being.
Yeah. My father is the one that has coached both men and women, as far as I'm aware. My mum has only ever coached girls, so she wouldn't be able to compare between men and women. There's definitely comments here and there that my dad has made, or even my current coach had made, because he's also coached men and women, in that women are more emotional or more volatile and they can't take on feedback as well as men and things like that, because we just start crying or whatever they may think happens. And they may tie that in with menstrual cycles, but I think I'm pretty lucky with my dad in that he's respectful of all those sorts of things. And I would hope that my other coach, he would certainly, make a joke about it, but he would never force you to do something that you didn't want to do, and he would accept whatever your reasoning may be. And I would hope that would be the same across the board, that other people would feel the same with their respective coaches and things like that. There certainly is probably a valid perception that women can be harder to coach than men, because we are a little bit more, emotional or take things more personally, when oftentimes it's just feedback based on, the physical performance of what you've done, not your character. But to me, that's, that occurs in every aspect of your life, and you've got different relationships with men and women, and you just have to figure out, techniques that work to get what you want, to get the best out of everybody that you have relationships in your life, whether it's work or sport or personal. You tailor yourself to the people that you're around. And so, coaches should be able to do the same thing, whether you're coaching men or women.